Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is Saturday, February 14th, 2026. Happy Valentine's Day to you. Though, if you've been looking at the news this morning, there is not a lot of love in the air.
No, not at all. It's been a brutal week for diplomats, hasn't it?
It really has. We're at the end of this whirlwind diplomatic sequence. It kicked off earlier this week at Aldenbiezen Castle in Belgium, and it's all wrapping up, well, right now at the Munich Security Conference.
And the rhetoric is, it's sharper than I've seen in years. Genuinely hostile between supposed allies.
Yeah, it feels brittle. The headlines are just screaming transatlantic broke up. You've got U.S. terrorists, you've got European panic, angry speeches. So, the big question, and the reason we're here today is pretty simple, is the West just falling apart?
It's the right question. But, the source material we're looking at today suggests something else. It's not a collapse. It's a renovation.
A very loud, very messy renovation.
Exactly. And an incredibly expensive one.
Okay, so to help us make sense of this, we are digging into a new strategic assessment. It's called The Global Review by Fareed Novin.
And we're focused specifically on the part titled Economic Doctrine and Security Architecture in the Post-Neoliberal Era.
That is a mouthful, post-neoliberal era.
It is, but the idea is crucial. Novin's whole point is that the era we grew up in, free trade, open borders for capital, assuming peace just follows. That's over. It's gone.
So you can't talk about economics without security anymore.
They're the same conversation now.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've got three main things we want to cover based on the report. First, this clash of doctrines. The new American civilizational idea versus Europe's technocratic response.
And that leads right into the second point, which is the political drama. This new power couple in Europe, the report calls it the Merzoni axis.
We'll get to that. And then finally, we have to talk about Greenland.
Yes, Greenland.
Because apparently a fight over an island almost started a full-blown trade war last month. So grab your coffee, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so you've got these two summits, and the vibes were just completely different. You had the Europeans at a castle in Belgium on the 12th.
Right.
And then you have the Americans and everyone else at Munich today. Let's start with Munich. Secretary of State Marco Rubio just finished his speech a few hours ago.
And that speech, people are going to be dissecting that for a long time.
Yeah.
He wasn't talking about trade deficits. He framed the whole U.S. strategy around something he called civilizational sovereignty.
Civilizational sovereignty. That sounds heavy. Less like economics, more like a philosophy lecture.
It's heavy and it's deliberate. He literally said, we are part of one civilization, Western civilization. But then he immediately criticized Europe for, in his words, outsourcing of sovereignty.
What does that even mean?
He pointed to the climate cult and migration, arguing they're weakening Europe from the inside.
So the message is, we're family, but you guys are losing your way, so we have to protect ourselves from your mistakes.
That's it, exactly. And the core idea here is that industrial capacity is a national security asset. It's not just about making things cheaper anymore.
It's about making sure you can make them at all.
Precisely, which is the whole justification for these so-called Trump tariffs.
Okay, let's talk numbers, because the slogan is one thing. The tariffs are the weapon. These are the Section 232 tariffs.
Right, and that's the legal clause. The president can restrict imports if they're a threat to national security.
And the rates are not small. 50% on steel and aluminum.
50, yeah.
25% on autos, plus new ones on semiconductors, pharmaceuticals.
And if you average it all out, the effective U.S. tariff rate right now is about 17%.
17%. Is that high?
It's massive. You have to go way back before World War II to see numbers like that. We spent 30 years getting that down to almost zero. This isn't a tweak. It's a full reversal of the global economic system.
So the logic for the U.S. is reciprocity.
Right. The view in Washington, and this is pretty bipartisan now, is that they opened their markets and got burned. Now they're closing the doors unless you play by their rules. No industrial base, no national security.
Okay, so that's the American pitch in Munich. Build it here or pay up. Now let's rewind 2 days to Aldenbiezen Castle. The Europeans are watching this. What's their response? They can't just slap on a 17% tariff overnight.
No, they can't. The EU is a legal framework of 27 countries. They move slower. So their doctrine is something they're calling managed interdependence.
Which has to be the most European name for a doctrine I have ever heard.
It sounds boring, but the stakes are incredibly high. You had President Macron saying Europe faces a choice between slow decline or a wake up with clear acceleration.
So if they can't use tariffs, what's their tool?
Regulation. They use regulation as power. The big one is the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism.
Let's pause on that. CBAM, how does that actually work?
Think of it like a green tariff. If you're a company in, say, Turkey or the US, and you want to sell steel to Europe, you have to prove it was made with low carbon emissions.
And if it wasn't?
You pay a fee to the EU.
So the U.S. uses national security to pluck trade, and Europe uses climate standards.
Different logic, same outcome. The walls are going up. But Europe has this huge internal problem the U.S. doesn't really have. Capital flight.
This was the part of the report that blew me away. The Austrian Chancellor, Stocker, dropped a number that was just 300 billion.
It's staggering. Every single year, 300 billion of European savings flows to the U.S. to be invested.
Wait. So European workers save money, which goes to Wall Street, which then finances American companies, who are the very competitors Europe is trying to beat.
That's exactly it. They are funding their own competition.
Yeah.
And that's why you hear this desperate push for a capital markets union. They have to keep that money at home.
It's like two different architectures clashing, and that leads us to this Merzoni thing.
Yes, the Merzoni axis.
Sounds like a pasta dish. I'll have the Merzoni.
It does, right? But it's actually a huge power shift. It's a portmanteau of Friedrich Merz, the German chancellor, and Giorgia Meloni, the Italian prime minister.
And normally we talk about the Franco-German motor, but something changed at Aldenbisen.
The motor stalled. Or maybe the Italians hot-wired it. Meloni got 19 member states to back a joint Italy-Germany policy paper. 19.
That's a huge coalition. So what's their vision? How is it different from Macron's?
It's a totally different philosophy. Macron wants federal ambition, strategic autonomy. He wants a Europe that's independent from the U.S.
A third pole.
Right.
Yeah.
Merz and Meloni, they want pragmatic competitiveness. They want made with Europe, not just made in Europe. They think cutting off the U.S. is suicide for their industries.
So they're more transactional.
Much more. And it's leading to what the report calls variable geometry.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting for all 27 countries to agree, which takes forever, groups of willing countries just move forward on their own. It's faster, but it makes the EU more fragmented.
Okay, so the economic battle lines are drawn. But you can't separate that from security. It's a strategic web. And that brings us to Ukraine.
The mood in Munich on Ukraine has definitely changed. A couple of years ago, it was all about breakthroughs.
And now?
Now the word is endurance.
The report talks about Putin's regime survival logic. What does that mean for the war?
It means we can't look at this as just a land dispute anymore. He's fighting to stay in power. If he loses this war, he's done. So Western unity doesn't make him compromise. It actually makes him dig in deeper. He has no other option.
That's grim. So what's the forecast?
The most likely scenario by 2031 is what the report calls a frozen high-intensity conflict.
Frozen high intensity, that sounds like a contradiction.
It does, but think of it this way. The front lines don't move much, so it's frozen. But the amount of ammo, drones, and money being burned through is still incredibly high. So high intensity, a permanent drain.
And that support all depends on trust, which finally brings us to Greenland.
The Greenland incident.
I still can't believe this was a major flashpoint. In January, just last month, President Trump threatened tariffs of 25% on 8 countries over a dispute about Greenland.
It sounds absurd, but it wasn't really about ice. It was a trust test.
Explain that. What was the test?
The U.S. was using tariffs to get concessions in the Arctic. Basing rights, control of shipping lanes. When the Nordic countries hesitated, the tariff thread came out.
So it's just, give us the base, or we tax your cars.
That's basically it. And for Europe, that was a shock. It showed the U.S. is willing to treat its closest allies like transactional adversaries.
So if you're a European leader, you're thinking, if they'll do this over Greenland, what's next?
Exactly. And that's where security and economics merge. If you can't trust the U.S. on basic sovereignty, you start buying insurance.
And that insurance is strategic autonomy, building your own defense systems.
Like, it turns the alliance from a family into a business transaction. You don't buy insurance on your family. You buy for things you think might break.
And the U.S. demands are kind of working then.
In a way. You're seeing Germany and others really ramp up defense spending. The debate is no longer, should we pay? It's, how fast can we spend the money? But it's coming from a place of anxiety, not just solidarity.
Okay, and looming over all of this is China.
The giant in the room. The Chinese foreign minister's at Munich, too, and you can be sure he's enjoying the show.
The U.S. calls China a systemic competitor. We had that tariff truce last year, but the fundamental problem is still there.
It is. And the math is just brutal. China produces 31% of global manufacturing.
31%, a third of everything.
Pretty much. The U.S. is at 17%. The EU is at 13%.
So China makes more than the US and the EU combined.
Just about. And here's the issue. Their own economy at home has slowed down, so they have this massive overcapacity. Too many electric vehicles, too many solar panels.
And since the US is closing its doors with that 17% tariff wall,
Those goods have to go somewhere, so they're getting dumped into Europe.
which puts Europe in a terrible position.
Exactly. If they take the cheap goods, their own industries get wiped out. If they block them, China retaliates. And that's the triangular game. China's strategy is divide and conquer. Cut deals with individual countries, break EU unity.
Okay, let's bring it all together. The report gives us a Bayesian outlook to 2031. What does the crystal ball say?
The most likely outcome is something they call managed convergence, or competitive parallelism.
Okay, break that down for me. Is NATO still a thing in 2031?
Yes. NATO is still intact, probably stronger militarily. The report says spending 3–5% of GDP on defense becomes the new normal in Europe.
That's a huge jump from the old 2% target.
It is, but the security situation demands it. But, and this is the big but, the relationship itself becomes far more transactional.
Less we are family, more we are business partners.
That's the perfect way to put it. And Europe develops parallel capacity. They'll build their own systems that do what American systems do. Not to be anti-American, but just to have a backup.
Because of that trust issue. If the US pulls the plug, they need the lights to stay on. And the Merdzoni future. Is that here to stay?
The report thinks so. That this pragmatic, industry-focused axis becomes more influential than the old France-Germany model. The center of gravity in Europe is shifting.
A fascinating picture. A stronger, maybe harder, but definitely colder West.
Colder is a good word. A West stripped of its illusions.
So as we wrap up, let's go back to that first question. Is the West falling apart?
No. But we're in this post-neoliberal world. Security defines economics now. You have to secure your supply chains, your borders, your alliances.
So under all the insults, the climate cults and cowardly tendencies, there's a renegotiation happening. The machine is being rebuilt.
It's functioning. It's just very ugly to watch.
And that brings us to our final thought. The report has the section on belief dynamics, because alliances aren't just treaties, they're about belief.
They're about the belief that the other person will show up when you need them. And that Greenland incident was a crack in that belief. If Washington threatens you with tariffs one day and then pulls back the next, it creates this deep uncertainty. So the question I'd leave you with is this. At what point does an ally stop seeing the U.S. as a partner to be embraced and start seeing it as a risk to be managed? Because once you cross that line, the alliance might still exist on paper, but the soul of it is gone.
A sobering thought. The machinery works, but the ghost in the machine is getting restless. As always, thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll be back next time. Until then, stay curious.